do you think this world would be different if we talked about our transformative experiences of nature?
I think we'd all take it a little more seriously. And I think more people would see that as a center place for our own healing, for being in community,
Yeah,
about
I
how we
think
relate to ourselves, how we relate to each other, and how we care for, reciprocity. We would maybe have a little more reciprocity with Earth in our lives.
Welcome to the Enchanted Earth podcast, where you will hear stories of nature with the power to transform our lives. These sacred stories are begging to be shared now. So listen in as my guest today shares one of their own.
welcome everybody. Today we have with us Michelle Doerr. And let me tell you a little bit about Michelle. She's a wildlife biologist and founder of Anavah Consulting LLC, where she integrates Adlerian psychology, that's a new term for me, and emotional wisdom to foster connection and healing and conservation. Okay, let me do that sentence again. Michelle Doerr is a wildlife biologist and founder of Anavah Consulting LLC, where she integrates Adlerian psychology, ecology, and emotional wisdom to foster connection and healing and conversation. With a background spanning wildlife agencies, the archery industry, and national leadership training, she helps individuals and organizations rediscover their relationship with self, community, and the living earth. So welcome, Michelle.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So I just love reading people's bios. I find that it's so fascinating to see all these different aspects of our lives that just seem kind of disparate in a way. And well, first, I do want to ask you about Adlerian
Adlerian?
psychology.
Yeah. So, yeah, most people are familiar with Freud. And maybe a few people, especially in this field, might be familiar with Carl Jung. And a lot of people don't know about Alfred Adler. So Adler, Jung, and Freud all existed at the same time. In fact, they hung out together. But they kind of split. I say that Freud. I say that Freud thought you could like split this, like this separate from this, like disconnect, and we'd be fine. What I love about Adler is a term called Gemeinschaftsgefühl, which loosely translates to social interest or community feeling. So that's kind of one of the pillars of Adlerian psychology. So, a quick test is like, is my struggle, does it have to do with me being self-interested or is it community interested? Right. And if it's self-interested, we have to examine that. Where that's coming from. Another one of the pillars is encouragement. So it's a lot of positive psychology has Adler underneath it, if you really take a look at it. So it's about using your strengths, using encouragement. And one of the quotes that I use in some of my workshops, it's from Dreikers, is a misbehaving child is a discouraged child. So find the discouragement. And so that's kind of, there's a lot more principles involved in it, but those two pillars are the ones that I sort of follow. And that Wes Wengert was one of the teachers that brought that to me. And so I just have always remembered that. He has a ladder. He shows a ladder where Gemeinschaftsgefühl and encouragement are the two sides. And then there's some other steps in there in between. Did that help you?
Yes, yes, and I'm really into Carl Jung and his work, and work with synchronicity and metaphor and
Yeah.
symbolism and dreams and divination of all types. I've always been into that throughout my life, and I love positive psychology. And I think a lot of people misunderstand what positive psychology is. They think it's like, oh, just be happy, you know? And it's not. It's like what feeds you, right? It's discovering like what really lights you up
Yeah.
and bringing those gifts out. And I think that is what is sorely missing in today's
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. And so I co-teach a class in nature and counseling here in Minnesota at Adler Graduate School. So it's very Adlerian based. And so I bring that to the nature work as well.
Oh wow. Oh wow. There's so much to dive into here. Okay. But first I just want to ask you, what was your childhood like connected to the natural world?
Well, I grew up on a dairy farm, so I was around animals all the time. And I, well, I didn't really get into Barbie dolls, but what I did was I would dress my cats,
Oh,
the parent cats in doll clothes. So, um, yeah, it was one of my silly things.
so wait, they were very pliant cats. They were very amenable to that.
So yeah, poor things. They saw me coming and run away. But no, I would also. We had like ducks and geese, and there were times where I would sit on the lawn and they would gather around me, and I would like talk to them um so I was always around animals. And then a couple of other things. So we because I lived on a dairy farm, there wasn't a lot of breaks. But when I did have breaks, there were two things for me that I think influenced my nature connection. One is I had a spot. There are 3 trees out in our grove, and that became my little playhouse. That was like my little place to escape. I could go there. I had like wheel caps for dishes and like just random parts, whatever. And that was my little playhouse when I was on the farm. And then if we had more time and I wanted to escape, there was the river, which was maybe only a mile from the house. And I could either hop on my bike or ride my horse, whatever, down to the river. And that water, any sort of flowing water, has always been my place of respite. And I think it came from that. That was my place to escape to, was the water and the turtles and the birds and whatever was there.
Water has such a magical quality.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So waterfalls, like if I need a place so it's still today, sometimes when I'm doing some work and I'm just really stuck or frustrated, there's a park that's 20 minutes from me that has this really awesome river with lots of rocks. And so everything's flowing. There's like a little mini waterfall there too. And I go there when I'm stuck and I just need to have some surroundings that are going to be safer for me, I guess.
wow. Yeah, and the metaphor of the flowing water to help us get unstuck. I mean, it's like this very deep resonance within us. When we hear that water flowing, it can help like unleash what needs to be released in order to find inspiration, huh?
And there's new, it's always flowing. There's new coming in and so water has always been that for me. And I do think it's from my childhood being able to go to the river.
Wow, you said, get on your horse and go down to the river as if it was just like, like a bike. And to me, I'm like, you had a horse to ride down to the river. So it was kind of your horse, like it was a horse that you used when you wanted to go horseback riding.
Yeah, he was Barney was my horse.
Oh.
I always wanted one when I was a kid, and we did have one. The first one we got sadly was not very healthy, so we did not have that horse very long. But this horse, his name was Barney, and when we got him, I could do anything with him. I could walk underneath him, do like, whatever. I could do whatever with him, and so he was my buddy. And I don't think he passed away until I was in college. So he was my. It was always interesting. There were times where I could walk out of the house, and I don't know if he heard my voice, and so he would like yell, "Hey, pay attention to me! I'm here." He had this way of kind of talking to you. That was interesting. So yeah, I had him for a lot of my life. Yeah.
Wow, that must be a special relationship that you can recall.
Yeah. Yeah. He there will, I mean, my horse was to me that my daughter has a dog. And so my horse was to me a place where, like, if I needed to talk to somebody, right, he would listen, right? I could just pet him or whatever. He would listen. Same way with my daughter and her dog. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, animals can sense our emotion. Absolutely. I mean, when I've gone through some really challenging things, even, maybe 15 years ago, I was going through like tremendous like turmoil in my life. And our dog Bailey was always there. And I just remember one time when I was so distraught, he came over to me and sat down and I hugged him and I just bawled my eyes out. I mean, I lost it and I just hugged him and I just felt like, somebody's here for me. And he had such a meaningful place in my life.
Yeah. And I'm glad I had that experience because I mentioned my daughter. We wrote a book together about our experience with her childhood eating disorder. And one of the chapters is about her dog. And when it was the same thing, like there were times where I could not do anything else. I was at my wit's end. And I would just say, go out and pet your dog. And she writes about him having in sort of an uncanny sense for when she was struggling, because he was outside, he would come up to the front window and kind of peer in to see what was going on. So he's 16 now. He's coming to the end of his time with us, but man, we literally, I don't think either of us would have survived without him. Yeah, we dedicated the book. We actually dedicated the book to him.
Wow.
Animals are powerful.
They are. And they're like angels that come into our lives to help us through whatever it is we're going through. It is definitely a magical relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, sometimes, especially she gets frustrated when people sort of, oh, it's just a dog.
Yeah, no, even I strongly believe even the animals that are out, wildlife that are outside our homes, they have lives. They have families, they have communication, they are sentient beings.
Yeah. My favorite is a chickadee. That's my favorite bird. So I'll be walking around outside and my mind will be going off somewhere else. And all of a sudden I'll hear a chickadee and it stops me right in my tracks, invites me to be present and pay attention. And so that's another one of my, I notice that. I notice when they're singing, and I also, if I'm walking through a wooded area somewhere, I also notice when they're missing.
Yeah. Yes, birds are really amazing. As I've gotten older, I've really appreciated like birding. Not that I'm a birder, but I am more, we all should be aware of the birds in our environment.
Yeah.
Just because they're beautiful and they add just such a wonderful dimension to our lives through their coming and going and their songs. And right now it's, spring is starting, although it doesn't feel like it so much.
Yeah.
We were just chatting about that before. And look, I'm wearing this like heavy, I've got a heater on. But the songbirds are like coming back to New York. And it's like, oh, like I wake up in the morning having my coffee and I'll hear a bird and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's a migratory bird. That is not a typical morning. Like when I hear the song, it reminds me of spring.
Yeah. Have you heard of the Merlin app?
I have it. Yes. I love it. Love it. Love it. And for anybody out there, Cornell Merlin ID bird app, it's free. You download it to your phone. And what I love now in the last few years is that sound ID where all you do is press the button and it will tell you what birds are in
Everything
the
is there.
area. And when they are calling, it lights up. So oh, that's the robin. Oh, that's the, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
And I'm amazed that even though I've loved nature, I've loved nature my whole life. I've been an environmentalist, but I haven't been observant of nature in my everyday life until probably the last maybe 10 years. But you have, let me hear your kind of, now, as you had this amazing experience of nature connection as a child. Really pretty rare, I think. It's not every day I speak with someone who grew up on a farm and being like intimately connected to animals and the tree grove and the river. So how do you feel that your childhood kind of directed you, your nature connectedness directed you to what you do in your life as an adult?
Yeah. Well, those experiences were definitely instrumental, but I have to say, the movie Born Free is actually my inspiration for wanting to be. I always wanted to be a tiger biologist, not lions, so tigers. But I realized when I was in college that there's probably like only 4 or 5 tiger biologists in the whole wide world. So maybe I should think of something a little more realistic. So I ended up working on white-tailed deer. So did a lot of deer biologist work, which here's for me, what's going on in the field of conservation is there's a lot of cognitive dissonance. And by that, I mean, so I originally, as a child, was interested in wildlife biology to save animals. And what I ended up doing is working on deer, and most of the deer work that I did was basically about managing deer in urban areas, which meant killing them. So there's there's this dissonance that I don't think is addressed in the field. Like we have to, like if there's invasive species, there's a lot of chemical use around invasive species. So that's like this dissonance between, you know, using a chemical and like there's a lot of that in the field.
Yeah.
So so I ended up working with deer primarily, and a lot of that was more like most of my work was human wildlife conflict. And I think the thing that's coming up for me that I want to say about that is it was very much like my childhood, kind of very rigid in that, you know, this is how it's done. This is how you manage deer in urban areas. This is how you deal with people, you know, animal rights activists are the enemies, like all this stuff.
Oh, wait,
And
I'm sorry, that's how you grew up?
I mean, that's the field early on was kind of like that, you know, when I first started.
Wildlife biology.
Well, the urban deer stuff that I did.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Not necessarily all the way across. I'm talking specifically about urban deer management. And it actually wasn't until I started doing some workshops at Adler Graduate School where I met Ev Haas, who managed the institute, and she would tell me have me come into her office, and she'd show me pictures of her backyard with her deer, her fox, her, you know, fox family, her this and that. And she told me her story. She used to live where there wasn't much, you know, she didn't have a backyard. She didn't have access to this place. And it made me realize that she loves that place and those animals like I would love a pet, like I would. And it just, there's something about her telling me that story that made me think we could have done urban deer management in a very different way back then. We could have acknowledged that, you know, we could have not acknowledged that story. And I think what we could have done better, because this is where my wildlife biologist stuff will come through. So in the urban settings, what happened was people would feed the deer because they thought that was a good thing. But then what that does is it amplifies the reproductive rate. So when we did some studies back then, yearlings, a 1.5-year-old and above had twins. That was the average, was twins. 30% of fawns were pregnant within their first year. That's how high the reproductive rate was. So I think what we could have done better is if, you know, people that did not ever want the animals killed could help us navigate the feeding issue, because by feeding the animals, you're making an unrealistically high reproductive rate, which leads us to have to remove more deer. Like, how can we come together on this issue? So I think we could have done better with that.
Yeah, it comes down to public education.
Yeah.
I belong to a local nature center, and it's all about educating the population about how to interact or not, leave animals alone, what's normal, what's not normal, you know, it is a challenge.
Yeah.
It is a challenge.
So, but that, you know, I had to hear that story, and I had to be ready to hear the story. I think that's the other thing. Like, I had to be open to hear that a different way of doing.
I'm curious, Michelle, because I mean, you grew up with animals on your land, and obviously lots of wildlife. So was it that you were just so kind of desensitized to that you didn't realize the love of the wildlife in your area? Because you were immersed in it?
I think growing up on a farm, I loved the animals, but I also saw death. Death is a part of it for sure. And even when my children were younger, having to explain a dying pet or something like that, I had to think back to my childhood, and I'm pretty sure nobody explained it to me. It was just a part. It was a
Right.
part of it. And so
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, desensitized is it? I think it's the reality. Like, I also grew up, I'm also was very actively involved in the hunting community. And, there's a lot of people would say that that's how can you hunt animals if you love animals? But actually, a true hunter who has the utmost respect for the animal, if they experience that life and death together, there is something about that is transformative, that you understand the full circle of life. Because you're a true hunter will utilize everything they possibly can from the animal for food, or the hides and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I love that. Yes, it is hard for someone like me who is not at all connected to that type of attitude, which is, as you say, it's like it's reality. It is the cycle of life. And what I think so many of us that have been separated from wildlife and the natural world, there's so much that we've lost, and we have lost that connection to life and death, that natural process. And so many of us have such a hard time then dealing with death of wildlife, of our pets. Yeah, it's not natural. It isn't natural. So what you just said about like hunting and it's a transformative experience, do you have a specific experience you could share with us that will help us?
Actually, probably the most intimate experience for me was I actually was able to hunt in Africa, and I shot a kudu, and
What is that? I'm
I
sorry.
a kudu. A kudu is if you look online and see it, you'll see it's about the size of a Midwestern white-tailed deer. They are larger, maybe a little bit larger than that, but they're the ones that have kind of the two kind of loopy horns
Horns.
coming up, and and it was a perfect shot, but I did literally see the spark go from its eyes. And it was, so if you're a hunter and you experience like that thing, right? It should create in you even more reverence for for animals, and for how you honor that animal after it. So I mean, that was an unusual experience, but so like here,
Well, I'm
you
sorry.
make sure. Go ahead.
I just wanted to just linger on that memory
Sure.
for a moment. So, so was it because you were so close to the animal? I just, can you just describe that moment of
Yeah.
that connection?
Well, I knew it was a kill shot. But it does take, it does take a little while for everything to go through. And so I was standing there. And so it all happens real quickly. So I was standing there, and I just really, for some reason, just saw the sort of saw the eyes drain. And thankfully, I'm very thankful that the people around me saw me in that moment and let me be there. They didn't come rushing in or, take pictures or whatever. They were very respectful of that moment that I had. And so I just paused there for a little bit. I put my hand on it, kind of said my own sort of internal blessings and stuff like that. And yeah, so it's a pretty deep experience. So I know it's hard to explain, from a hunting perspective, why you would do that. And ultimately it is like, I know where my food comes from. I was actively involved in the food, in food. And so I think that's sometimes a miss for people that don't hunt. I haven't hunted a lot lately, I'll be honest. I'm a social hunter. I go if people ask me, and I just don't go by myself. It's not my thing. So
Yeah, I think there's I couldn't help but be moved by that. Um, there is a lot that we lose when we're kind of brought up in this modern world.
yeah. There was a movie, I think, that I was it's called Cold November. It's a movie that was filmed here in Minnesota, and it's about basically a matriarchal family that goes hunting. And so it's this girl's sort of rite of passage in hunting. But the movie is, I think it's a beautiful movie. But I had a chance to go to the opening, one of the openings, and the lead actress who plays the 13-year-old is from the city. She'd never been hunting. And so she had to go get her hunting certification. She had to go through this actively involved, like while they were filming. And what she said about the fact when they were gutting the deer in the movie, where she was actually involved in that process, was really transformative for her. She got that connection. She got that understanding of our responsibility with life and death. You had to hear her say it, but that was a beautiful experience for me to hear someone from her background say what she said about her experience in hunting. So even though she probably will not hunt herself, she understands it much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know a few years ago, my son, when he was going to school, a forestry school up in the Adirondack Mountains, he got to spend a semester in a tiny home. It was a tiny cabin that was just like one room, no heat. I mean, it had a stove that he fed with wood, no running water. And he was on a farm, and they had pigs and cattle. And one of the things that he told us was that at the end of the season, he would get an opportunity to perhaps slaughter one of the pigs, because that's what they do once a year, and to have the food for the rest of the year. And I was like, whoa, really? Okay. And I was very nervous about the experience. And when it came time to do it, he backed away. I think it was, and I can imagine that it would be a very difficult decision when you're not brought up that way. So emotional. I mean, I was just emotional hearing you share your story. So
Yeah.
I don't think I could bring myself to do anything like that. So, I mean, but if I needed to survive, I would have to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is how humanity has lived for millions of years. So yeah, we are so disconnected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Hmm.
That is really profound. I would love to open it to you to share any other stories that
Denise,
you would like
actually,
to share.
what came to mind for me just now, going back to the Adlerian discussion, is I'm actually presenting at the North American Society for Adlerian Psychology this year. It'll be my first time, so I'm a little nervous, especially since my my talk is called the Outdoor Life Task. So the way I learned that Adler was that there are 5 life tasks. Let me see if I can name them all. Love and sex, work, and social were the originals. Some years later, self and spirituality were added as life tasks. So I learned 5 life tasks. I am challenging the Adlerian community to say that you're missing one, and it's the center one, which is the outdoor life task, because we would not. I mean, our life force is nature. And so I'm going to argue that not only should that be a life task, but it should be the central task. And I'm doing it in front of a bunch of professionals coming in from, I'm a wildlife biologist telling psychologists. So I'm going to be a little nervous, but, I truly believe in it. I believe, we were talking about the disconnection, and I don't have it right on me, but I'll use it in the presentation, that he says something about social interest being potentially expanded to animals, rocks, and ultimately out to the cosmos. So I'm using that quote as like my central. I think Adler was going there, but he just didn't get there.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to bring a lot of this disconnection. And the reason that we're in the state we're in is because that hasn't been our one of our life tasks.
Yes. I so applaud that. I am so excited and I want to hear that talk. So if there's any way I could get a recording, Michelle.
I think they might record it. I'm not sure.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. But it's fascinating because I think in many in all the sciences, they've ignored kind of the background of our lives, the natural world. And I don't mean wildlife biologists and stuff, but I'm just the that more sentient connection that is so essential to healthy human development. It's kind of like we're immersed in it, so it was kind of ignored.
Yeah.
And I see that just from a framework of understanding, like our environments. I think for so long, maybe centuries, the backdrop to our lives has been ignored and wasn't a significant player in the story of our lives. It was just there. And it was like we were on a stage. Yeah. It didn't matter what was on the stage. We were having our lives. And I think we're really kind of coming back to that now. In many of the scientific, social sciences and earth sciences, they're really coming back to it, but it's still fringe.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we do, even in conservation and environmental fields, is we forget. I mean, I think there's this thing that nature is out there, but it's right here. It's right here. It's what I have in here. Like, it is plants in the house, like it's right here. And so I think that's the other disconnect that I try to talk about some is we are nature, right? And everything around, like I have paper, I have tons of paper around me. That's nature. And we forget that. And we also tend to think of nature as out there, which also is not true.
Exactly. And really, when you think about it, every single thing around us is nature because it's derived from natural materials. I mean, every single thing. We didn't just make things out of the thin air.
Right. Yeah.
So everything is nature.
Yeah. And even though, even the people that I work with in the field of conservation have themselves disconnected in a way that they don't even realize. Yeah. They've spent I actually do a poll in some of my workshops where I ask them how often do they get, outside. Is it daily, weekly, monthly, or, quarterly, whatever? And there are very few people that have a daily interaction. And probably a bigger chunk that have a week, a more weekly. But the numbers are kind of sad that people in our own, nature related fields are spending way more time behind a desk than they're actually doing work out there. So,
and I'd like to even say that it also depends on what you categorize as being outdoors. I mean, we're outdoors, to go from our, home to the car or to the mass transit or whatever, where we have these short spans of time. Most of us every day, unless we're working from home and, we don't go out. But even those short periods of time can be more present in the moment and not just observing, but kind of participating, engaging with the weather, with the sky, with trees as you walk by. It's just about being mindful, right?
Exactly. Yeah. During COVID, when I was doing some presentations, my little shtick was open the front door instead of the fridge door.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, what do you think? Well, this was really wonderful speaking with you, Michelle. And I just love hearing these different stories and perspectives from everybody who comes on. And I loved hearing your connection to wildlife and farm animals and your experiences with hunting. It is something that is unique, I think, for many people not having that connection. And also, I think it helps us understand that people that are hunters are not just going out there for like trophies.
Yeah, and that's on them. Some of that is on them because that's what you see.
Yes.
You don't see the reverent part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I thank you for bringing that to the audience today and really moving me very deeply. So any last words you'd like to share?
Get outside.
Very
Get
good
outside
words.
and pause. Get, if you don't know the birds, get the Merlin app. It's so much fun. Just really step outside the door and just be present for a moment, even if it's just a moment.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on with me today.
You are welcome. It was so nice to be a part of this. I can't wait to see it when it's done.
Yes, yes. And for those of you listening, please, if you would love to comment, we're going to respond to your comments below. If you want to share it, also subscribe to the channel, I would be deeply grateful. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the Enchanted Earth podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so that you'll know when we publish another inspiring episode. Check out my book, The Enchanted Earth, available wherever online books are sold. Thank you and have a magical day.